I'm going to talk about All Quiet on the Western Front, the movies. There's a new one that's on Netflix that I haven't watched because I know it will annoy me to no end. And from what I understand from people who've seen it, this is true because they've said that it really focuses on the muck, the grime, the violence, the dehumanization, the post-traumatic stress syndrome, all that kind of stuff. There are two problems. The first is that in our media or our entertainment for the past 10 to 20 years, there's tons of gore. I mean, you can't, I think if you want to see how a bullet enters a head or a body or its effects or what shown as the worst effects, you can find that in a movie today. Movies bend over backwards, each one trying to overdo themselves by showing gory violence. There's no amount of gory violence that I think that All Quiet on the Western Front is going to show that hasn't been shown already in some sort of crime or other war movie. It's been done and done to death. But again, in All Quiet on the Western Front, in the new one, it's like, well, but we're going to really show it in the context of the war so you really understand how war is bad. It's not going to work. And it's not going to work is explained by the first movie, the first interpretation of the book. So in the first movie, this is basically what happens. There's a young man, he's in school, his professor says, oh, the motherland, fatherland, whatever is being attacked, and we must defend it. We must go, protect our homes and our lives. So he joins up into the army, he goes to the front, and all kinds of horrible things happen to him, right? All the things that happen, I'm sure, in the second movie, though it's in black and white, so you're just not going to get all this fetishness about the gore and everything like that. So he experiences all that, gets wounded, and he comes home. And he goes to the cafe where when he was a kid, he could never sit at the big table with all the adults, all the burghers of the town, right? All the important people. But now that he's been on the front and he's a war hero, he's invited to this table he could never sit at. So he sits at the table and all the old men, clap at him and say, so, what was it like? And anyway, they start to go into like how important it is that he fights and blah, blah, blah. And then they bring out a map and they say, yes, so this is the way it is, right, to him who's been on the front. And he says, it's not like that. It's not like that at all. And what do they say? They say, well, you don't understand. Maybe you understand your little part of it, but you don't understand the big picture. So does he really try and convince them? No, there's no way to convince them, right? He just politely gets up and goes back. He goes outside the school where he hears another batch of kids being told what they need to do, not being told what's really going on at the front line. That trumps this new movie. That shows what the problem of our society is, because we think that if we just look at enough gore, that somehow, if everybody looks at it, like if Putin looked at enough gore, that he would say, oh my God, this is horrible. All these people getting killed. Let's stop the war. All these babies, these mothers, these children, whatever. It doesn't work that way because he's not looking at that kind of stuff. All Putin's regime, Ukraine's government, the U.S. government, us, nobody's looking at how our societies have set up a system where there are two things going on. I'm going to talk about the arguments of both movies of All Quiet in the Western Front. Okay, so the argument for the first one, the 1930s, is society sends young men to fight a war on the front to defend the society's values, whatever they are. The young men suffer many horrors. When the young men come back into society, they explain that those values are not being fought over. Everyone is doing everything they can to survive while being ordered to kill each other. It's as simple as that. There's no other thing going on. Society responds that the men only understand the small picture, that indeed the war is being waged for the benefit of that society, even if they don't understand that. So that's the argument of the first movie. The argument of the new movie is that men end up on the front. It doesn't matter how they got there. The young men suffer many horrors. If everyone understood just how gruesome those horrors were, they'd stop the war. So the solutions to the war, again in the first movie, is that societies must communicate and do everything they can to prevent war. That's why the United Nations was founded. It wasn't founded as a joke. This is what they learned. If war begins, best to stop it as soon as possible and talk, because in the end, societies will pour as much men and equipment as they have until one side runs out. But that's been forgotten. The reason that the UN has become a joke isn't because it doesn't serve a good purpose, it's because everybody has forgotten the fundamental law, rule, whatever that it was based on, which is that's the truth. Like nations will just pour as much men and equipment into the war as possible until everybody just runs out. I mean, that's what happened in World War II. So they said, well, we don't want to do that, so we're going to start the United Nations. Now, as people forgot that, the United Nations became weak. Now, in the new movie, the argument is that to prevent or stop wars, everyone needs to watch the most graphic movies about the horrors of war because they don't understand how bad it is. If everybody understood how bad it was, we wouldn't go to war. But that's a childish view. And it's that very view that the first movie disproved. But it's been forgotten. Because if you don't really have, like I said, a super direct experience of war, this is what you think. You think your brain is smarter. You think that just because you think it, it's going to happen. But let me take it a step further. Let's say I agree with the new movie of All Quiet on the Western Front, that the problem is that we don't understand the horrors. So, okay, I believe it. So why can't, when I pay my taxes, why can't I decide how much money I'm going to put towards the military to defend the United States or any citizen of any country? That makes complete sense, right? We'd all just do a little research on how the military works and read various people saying, we need this much, that much, whatever. And, some of us might put in a lot of money because we feel we have to have, offensive power. Some might just put because we need some defensive, and some may pay no money at all because they just believe, weapons are bad, period. And don't get me wrong, we could just take that money, whatever money you spent, and if you didn't put it towards war, you put it towards education, whatever. Like everybody would be able to do that. That's the only way that the logic of the new movie would work, is if when we go to watch that movie, we can then act on our horror and pull back the money. Because the first movie says, as long as you keep sending men and money, people will keep getting killed. That the only way to stop it is to stop the people that are sending the men and the weapons. It's not right. So it just blows my mind. Anyway, I just wanted to really sort of explain each argument of each movie, so you judge for yourself which you think is the more compelling argument. I would definitely very much recommend you watch the first movie, first All Quiet on the Western Front. But if you don't want to, I'm now going to put the clip of that scene that happens near the end of the movie, right? Where, again, he sold all this tribalist thinking, all this nationalism. He goes to the front. He sees what really is going on there. He comes back. And this is a scene where he goes into the cafe, now, a war hero. Then after this scene, he goes by the school. And you all know the end of the movie. And if you don't, we'll go see either version. I'm sure it's pretty much the same. Okay, on to the clip.
We're behind the lines, but we know how to honor the soldier who goes on in spite of blood and death. Gentlemen, my son.
Roses. I'm glad to know you, young man. I'm glad to know you. And how are things out there? Terrible, eh? Terrible. But we must carry on. After all, you do at least get decent food out there. Naturally, it's worse here. Naturally. But the best for our soldiers all the time. That's our motto. The best for our soldiers.
Best for our soldiers.
What? You must give the Frenchies a good licking. And if you boys want to come home, let me show you what you must do before you can come home. Give us a hand there, men. Now then, there's the line. It runs so, in a V. Here is San Quentin. You can see for yourself. You're almost through now. All right? Shove ahead out there and don't stick to that everlasting French warfare. Smash through the Johnnies, and then you will have peace.
When you get in it, the war isn't the way it looks back here.
Oh, you don't know anything about it. Of course, you know about the details. But this relates to the whole, and you can't judge that. Of course, you do your duty and you risk your life. But for that, you receive the highest honor.
I said that every man of the mortar had the Iron Cross.
First, the enemy lines must be broken through in Flanders.
On to Paris. Push on to Paris.
No, not in Flanders. Now, I tell you just where the break should come.
Here.
The enemy has too many reserves there. I insist upon Flanders.
I know, but my dear man, why should they do that when they're halfway through San Quentin already? Why go the other way?
Because Flanders is a flat country. There are no mountains, no obstruction.
But there's many rivers there.
They